Gyomei versus Kokushibo is not close, nor has it ever been close. Obviously, in his base form, Gyomei isn't even near Kokushibo. The real contention comes in when Gyomei gets his Demon Slayer mark and stacks that with the Transparent World. How does he fare against Kokushibo? But even with his full power, Gyomei with these abilities still falls short of Upper Moon 1, and I can prove it. One rule before I start the video is I am limiting Kokushibo to just his base form here, since any version of Kokushibo after this is massively more powerful than Gyomei. The two have no choice but to just run around dodging attacks and can't even get close to the guy, and Mark Gyomei goes on for an entire page just glazing Kokushibo's speed and how he can't launch a single attack against him, let alone get close to him. So I think it's pretty safe to say Longsword Kokushibo would put the moves on any form of Gyomei, but I don't think you needed me to tell you that. The more interesting question is how Gyomei fares against Kokushibo's base form. A lot of people seem to think that Gyomei in his base form is pretty impressive against Kokushibo's base form. This is to the extent where some people have even claimed the two are potentially relative. That is, until you remember that Kokushibo's speed and coordination are nerfed by Sanemi's Marichi blood, and Kokushibo is deducing Gyomei's abilities before he ever launches his own attacks. Sanemi has rare Marichi blood that intoxicates demons, and this specifically is more potent against stronger demons, at least in Sanemi's words. When Kokushibo decides to get serious against Sanemi, he ramps up his speed and Sanemi is barely able to react to him. In the following panel, Kokushibo seems to just either blitz or just massively outpace Sanemi. Shortly after this, a weakened base form Sanemi, and I say weakened because his entire body is cut up and he has to use breathing to maintain its shape, is just straight up able to press Kokushibo backwards into a defensive state and causes Kokushibo to misplace his steps multiple times. This effect lasts even in the middle of his longsword form according to Sanemi, although the blood nerf isn't as effective at that point where base Sanemi was keeping up with Kokushibo, it's still there. And based on how well Sanemi performed against Kokushibo here, it seems to be nearly a blitz level of a nerf. But like I said, the nerf probably isn't as bad when base form Gyomei shows up, but it's still something to consider, and it is hindering Kokushibo's combat speed. The next important detail is that Kokushibo is holding back. He fights Sanemi for around the length of an entire chapter before he decides to actually try, and very shortly after this is when he badly outpaces Sanemi. Similarly, he is doing the same thing against Gyomei. He starts off the initial portion of this battle fighting extremely cautiously, defensively, and analyzing Gyomei's attacks, even getting caught off guard multiple times by Gyomei's abilities and powers, such as Gyomei's chain being more durable than he expected, and Gyomei using the chain with such agility that he can't even believe it, in Kokushibo's own words. But finally, when Kokushibo and Gyomei clash their second and fourth forms respectively, Gyomei takes his first bit of damage of the fight and loses the clash. Gyomei immediately admits he must use the Demon Slayer mark and that if he dies now, everything will be for nothing. I think that's a pretty overlooked and wild statement that Gyomei outright thinks he will die if he continues to fight. This should put into perspective how massive the gap between Gyomei and Kokushibo is. Upper rank 1, even while nerfed by Marichi blood, makes the strongest Hashira forced into using his Demon Slayer mark with just one mere attack. After some brief conversing between the two, Gyomei and Kokushibo have their only one-on-one clash before Sanemi enters the fight to aid Gyomei. At least the only one-on-one clash between Mark Gyomei and Kokushibo's base. In this brief instance, it seems neither fighter is able to damage the other, but again, this is only for a few panels before Sanemi's arrival, and with the aid of Mark Sanemi, the two Demon Slayers are able to press Kokushibo pretty impressively here. Mark Sanemi just outright blatantly overpowers Kokushibo here, and Mark Gyomei is able to touch a piece of his hair with one of his attacks. The most impressive thing that Gyomei does here is take advantage of Sanemi distracting Kokushibo to get in close and cut his ear off. We clearly see the panel before that Kokushibo is running alongside Sanemi, and Gyomei cuts him off by surprise in the following panel. Now this is impressive for Gyomei, but Kokushibo, even at this close distance, is still able to react and almost avoid the attack entirely, with Gyomei still being able to cut off his ear. Gyomei and Sanemi then unleash a combo attack and shred Kokushibo's kimono before he unleashes his longsword form. Now, all this is impressive, but all this really tells us is if a fight were to happen in a true one-on-one scenario between Mark Gyomei and Kokushibo, even in just his base form, Gyomei probably won't be able to tag Kokushibo at all. Gyomei only barely tagged a Marichi nerfed Kokushibo after Sanemi distracted him so he could get in close. Mark Gyomei probably has a nice strength edge since Mark Sanemi alone was straight up able to overpower Kokushibo, but I don't see how this would really help Gyomei since I don't think he's fast enough to ever really capitalize on this. It's a bit difficult to say if Kokushibo in his base form is fast enough to tag Mark Gyomei, but given how fast Gyomei tired out after Kokushibo hit him with literally one attack when they were fighting base to base, I think Kokushibo could run his stamina down and start landing consistent blows until he just kills Gyomei. Since a hypothetical base form Kokushibo would just be faster than this because he wouldn't be Marichi nerfed, and Gyomei can literally only tag him once with the help of Sanemi and not even targeted at his neck, Mark Gyomei doesn't really stand a chance against a full power base form Kokushibo. But once again, I still don't even think most people have an issue with that. Obviously, the most interesting matchup is Gyomei with his Mark and the Transparent World versus Upper Rank 1 Kokushibo. As a refresher of what the Transparent World is, it's an ability that gives you precognition by analytical prediction of muscle movements and blood flow of an opponent. It also lets you perceive attacks in slow motion to instantly counterattack appropriately. This form of Gyomei is pretty blatantly misunderstood, so I want to go over what exactly happens in this fight from this point because it's a bit confusing of what actually ensues. I remember when I first read this, I really had no idea what the hell was going on, so I'm just going to explain it to everyone. Gyomei with the Transparent World is able to assess Kokushibo's bodily functions and blood flow, as well as his own body's blood flow, which we know because Tanjiro just outright states this is the case. You can see your own blood flow with this ability. Some important dialogue before Gyomei unlocks this, though, is he speculates that Kokushibo is using some sort of supernatural ability to determine his moves, and he's right. Kokushibo has the Transparent World. Gyomei says that Kokushibo reads him the moment he thinks of launching an attack, which is pretty important for the plan that Gyomei comes up with here shortly, so keep this statement in mind. After unlocking his own Transparent World, he decides to test to see if this is the ability Kokushibo is using to analyze and fight the Demon Slayers with. His plan is to throw one of his prayer beads while reversing the flow of his blood to see if that can trick Kokushibo. If he's able to successfully throw the prayer bead, he can deduce whether or not Kokushibo is using the Transparent World or not to predict their attacks. And this is absolutely correct. Kokushibo is using the precognition of the see-through world to deduce how Gyomei will attack, and when Gyomei throws this prayer bead, Kokushibo doesn't notice and the bead strikes his hand. Kokushibo is extremely confused on what just happened and stops attacking altogether because he's so shook by how Gyomei threw this bead and he didn't understand how he missed it. Directly after this scene, Sanemi attempts to attack him, which he successfully dodges, but while this is happening, Gyomei throws his chain behind Kokushibo and pulls it so it strikes the back of Kokushibo's shoulder, to which Kokushibo responds, quote, "Again, I see," meaning that Gyomei once again is using this blood flow trick to catch Kokushibo off guard, not that he actually outsped him. Even if you don't think the attack is like coming from behind, you think it's just a weird POV shot, we still have the statement from Kokushibo that heavily implies that it's Gyomei using the blood flow trick. This was also set up by Sanemi's combo attack right before this, and Kokushibo reacts to Gyomei multiple times after this, so just none of it really works. There's also even more dialogue right after this to confirm that Kokushibo was indeed tricked. Kokushibo is analyzing Gyomei's abilities It admits that Gyomei deceived his eyes. He controlled his own blood circulation and disturbed my attack, he says. We know this is in reference to the prayer bead that he threw, because after Muichiro strikes Kokushibo, he says the prayer bead dulled his attack. The point being, other than just to clarify this scene composition for everybody, is that Gyomei tricks him with the prayer bead by reversing his blood flow, and then tricks him again by using that same blood flow ability to hit him with his ball and chain, and none of these are really speed feats at all. Gyomei doesn't really have super impressive speed feats with this form, at least not in comparison to Kokushibo. Now, he does have some insane mutant level battle IQ feats, but he's tricking Kokushibo and not using his actual speed to pull off these feats, which Kokushibo acknowledges in the same page about Gyomei, saying, quote, "Deceptions and disturbances are pointless once I understand them," which is true. He figured out what Gyomei did to outsmart him, admits that he got tricked, and now implies that he has the ability to not only kill Gyomei, but the rest of the Demon Slayers themselves. Now, he was wrong about this deduction, but it wasn't really his fault because he was paralyzed by Genya after this, which sort of changed the next sequence of events, but that's not really relevant. So if you were to pit Kokushibo and Gyomei in a fight against one another, bloodlusted, Kokushibo in base and Gyomei at max power, even if Gyomei tricks Kokushibo similar to this, he still wouldn't win the fight. And I know what you're thinking, like, what? He literally tricked him, we literally saw it. And that's because Gyomei cannot behead Kokushibo. Even when Kokushibo was paralyzed, Mark's see-through world Gyomei tried to behead him with the big ball part of his chain, and he just blatantly couldn't do it. And they were only able to defeat Kokushibo when Mark Sanemi helped Gyomei behead him. And the most important sequence here is Kokushibo is still able to react to Gyomei trying to use his axe to come under his neck. If you remember what I was saying earlier, that Gyomei with the see-through world has no real impressive speed feats, this is probably the worst of them, and it's Kokushibo reacting to him and blocking him with ease. This isn't even the only example Kokushibo reacts to Gyomei here though, as when he's paralyzed from Genya's Blood Demon art and from Muichiro's blade, Mark's see-through world Gyomei launches at him, and Kokushibo reacts by emitting a bunch of swords from his body. Now, I know this is a little bit weird because this is more of a longsword ability, but I'm just showing the point that Gyomei isn't actually getting physically faster with the see-through world, and Kokushibo can still react to him. Longsword Kokushibo's reaction speed and perception should be literally the exact same as his base form, as the range, speed, and area of effect of his moon breathing is just drastically increased because he has a longer sword, which is what makes him so threatening, not that he's actually physically faster. So if Kokushibo here is able to easily react to see-through world marked Gyomei, he should still be able to react to him in his own base form, even up close and personal like this. And if Gyomei tricks him with his blood manipulation thing again, which I think is extremely likely because it happened in canon, and this time he decides to aim for the head, he simply can't win. He doesn't have a win con because he won't be strong enough to actually behead Kokushibo. Kokushibo can react to all of Gyomei's attacks, and I think Gyomei would definitely be fast enough reaction time wise to at least avoid Kokushibo for a good while and give him a good fight. But because he's human and Kokushibo is a demon, he will eventually run out of stamina and Kokushibo will end up with the win. The best case scenario I can think of for Gyomei is to take him from the Muzan fight with the red blade and have him somehow be fast enough to just remove Kokushibo's limbs, which again, he's not that fast. Kokushibo can react to everything he does, and then he would have to use the blood flow trick to hit his head and then use the axe to clamp his head down, because otherwise I don't know how he would actually be able to behead him. And if he used the red blade strategically to remove his arms or something, maybe that would be enough to get rid of Koku's head. But you see how far, and it's such a stretch just to even make it remotely close. A lot of that just seems really, really big reaches, and in the most likely interpretation, he's just going to use the see-through world to trick Kokushibo, realize he doesn't have the AP to beat him, and he's just going to get stamina drained and just lose the fight at that point. It just simply isn't fair.